Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Empowered to Live. I am your host, Andrea Rose Butler of Becoming Woman's Network. And our podcast, as you know, helps you align your purpose, your mindset, and your lifestyle with what God has called each and every one of us to do. And so today we are continuing our series on getting your financial house in order. As you know, we've been talking over the past 3 weeks, so this will be week four, about you can talk about your money mindset, your money story, rewriting your money story. And today we're going to be talking about, is your bag secure? So, and what does that mean to secure your bag? What does that mean to get their house in order and to have your bag secure? And I know a lot of times when we hear that, I'm secure in my bag, it's about the hustling and all this other stuff that we've got to do, but it's beyond and more than just you know getting our finances in order. So it's not just about money in the bank. It's about stability, and we've talked about your money story before, where because of how we were raised or whatever reason, we have different mindsets about money and how we see and view money. And so it's more about that. So it means about financial planning, having a financial plan, and not living in that state of chaos. It's knowing about what comes in, what money is going out, and then also building a legacy. And next week we'll have our guest on the show, Rita Stewart from Legacy Financial. She'll be talking about some of those things about getting out of debt and um, how to save and different things and why we don't save, and so just a myriad of different things. So stay tuned for that episode. Of she'll be with us next week, and then the week after, just sharing about your getting your house in order, like about the legacy of that. So beyond securing the bag, what does that mean when we just get the bag together? And then how do we keep it safe and leave a legacy for our children going forward, and not just about living today? I shared, I think it was last week, maybe the week before, about the fact that, we tend to be consumers. We spend, 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 spend. And when a storm hits, or even not even the storm, it could be just a sprinkle, and we are shook because of the fact that we don't have a foundation. We don't have anything set aside for minor repairs or a minor medical situation or any of those things. We just not in place. We just don't have it. We don't have any savings. A lot of times, you hear financial pundits talk about having an emergency fund, and it's different for everyone. Some people say, have $500. Some say have 1,000. Some people are talking about at least having enough saved to replace a month of your paycheck in case something happens. Because what happens if you need to be out and maybe your company doesn't offer short-term disability? How do you keep your bills going and being paid and surviving if you don't have the funds in your account to help you when things happen, when the rain comes? And so we want to make sure that we are secure in our bed. So one of those things in my research, it talks about auditing your financial house. Do you know where your money's going each month? Keep a track of that. There's so many things available where you can track. There are different softwares where you can, where it aligns with your bank account, and then it tells you each month, this is how much you spent. And so you can look and see, where is your money going? Because that's one of the first things in securing your bag. You need to know, may know what's coming in, but do you know what's going out? And sometimes when we take a look at what we spend in a given month on certain items, we were like, oh my God, I can't believe that I spent this much on lunch, or I spent this much, getting Starbucks, or I spent this much doing whatever. And you're like, this is where my money's going. Because a lot of times we swipe that card, swipe that card, swipe that card, and we don't pay attention, because, oh, I got it. Yeah, you may, but do you have a solid foundation, a place to fall back on in case something happens? So you want to, where's your money going? Um, I had a thing where I had alerts set up, and I still do. I have alerts set up for my checking account, so something comes out, whether I have something on auto pay or whatever, it comes out that lets me know, hey, so and so took money from you, this is your available balance. And I get an alert every morning. So it lets me know where I am. So I'm checking and making sure I know where I am, so I don't get to that place. I'm like, oh my God, I don't have enough money. I go out and don't want to embarrass myself um, by not knowing. So you want to make sure that you're checking that as well, and making sure that you're also not impulse spending. I think I've shared this before. I go to a store and I will see something and I was like, oh, I really like this. But then it's like, do I really need this? And like, it's like, you don't need another purse. Do not buy another purse. Go in the store, they're like, nope, you don't need that purse. I was like, but it's so cute. I like purses. And so I, don't- I gave away a lot before I moved. I gave stuff away, but still, the thing was, do we go into the store? Like, oh, I want this. Oh, I want this. Oh, I want this. And we're buying on impulse just because. And so bring that awareness to yourself that you're not just impulse shopping. You're not just, oh, let me get this, let me get this. Even in the grocery store, oh, that looks good. Oh, that, we go and they say never go to the grocery store hungry, because then you buy more than you actually need. And so you want, so some is some of those tips that we need to have, making sure that we're not overspending. And so we want to bring forth an awareness of what it is that we're doing and how we're doing and why we're doing. And so that's making sure that we are paying attention to those. Check your credit. How often do you check your credit score? The three credit bureaus are there. You can check them, and I've set myself up so it's like I check one this quarter, and then the next one next. But I also have I use Credit Karma, and it's not an endorsement, but I use Credit Karma, and Credit Karma at least gives me the major two, TransUnion and Equifax. So those are the other, and then I signed up for Experian Alert. So that's all three credit bureaus. Sometimes through your bank account, you can check your FICO score, and knowing what that number is, because that number affects so many things. It affects your car insurance rate. It affects whether or not you get a loan and the interest on your credit cards and all those different things. So you want to make sure that you know what that number is and where you stand. And so a good rule of thumb is to check that with your bank. They offer it for free, that you can go ahead and check that FICO score, know where you are. Again, it's about that awareness of knowing where you stand financially in the market, and so what's affecting your rate. So if you have, a lot of these credit cards, you're paying 30% interest per month, compounding that interest uh, over every time, and you look and you owe them $100, and your 30% interest rate on a credit card, the next month you think you paid them 40 and you still owe them 100, and it never ends. And so, making sure that you are aware of that. So making those small steps. So I would say the biggest thing, if you have a high interest credit card and you have other debt, I would say focus on getting rid of. That's what I've been, I've heard um, through other financial educators, is to start with the highest interest credit card first, pay that off and get rid of it. You know, keep it very low. I would say close it right away, because closing it affects your credit score. When you close out an account, it does, get your credit score to tremble a little bit. It may go down a point or two when that card closes. But I would say pay it down and get it off, because again, the more you owe on that card, the greater it is for you. So you want to make sure that you're paying that card off, and that you're not having those debt And so making sure um, that you know where you are. If your credit score is low, and um, Ms. Stewart, we're talking about in the next week, if your credit score is low, work on it. Work on getting it. So by paying that debt, if it's one of the things that will affect your debt is not paying on time. Making sure that you're paying your debt on time. Don't you may have to sacrifice, and I shared this last week. Sometimes you may have to sacrifice that latte and for a week or two or a month or whatever to make sure that you're paying down that debt and getting that debt off of you, and making sure that just something that you're not carrying over, because it does affect you in such a great way. So making sure that you know what your credit score is, making sure what your FICO score is, paying those, checking your credit, make sure somebody didn't use your credit, and that you're unaware of, that you may have a bill out there that you weren't aware of. Maybe if you co-signed for someone in the past and maybe their credit is shot, or maybe you were divorced, and you're still linked. Because I know that happened to me. Um, my When I got divorced, um, his new wife and I have the same first initials, and almost the second initial, all second name, letter of her first name is almost the same. Is the same, should say. First and second letters are the same, but we have different names. And so they had something together when we had already been divorced, and it came to me, and they were sending it to me, and I was like, no, that's not me. We've been divorced for a long time, and so no, that's them. But for some reason, they still had us joined together. And so when he had issues with his credit, and they came to me, and I was like, no, that's not me. So make sure that this is before computers and internet and all those different things. They got a letter in the mail, and I'm like, how are you finding me, but you can't find him? Uh, so make sure that you're checking those things, making sure that there's not a debt in your name or somebody else defaulting, that you may be linked to, whether through marriage or friendship or situationship or whatever it is. Then you all co-sign together, and even though you may have separated, you may still be linked, credit wise, and that may be affecting your credit as well. So you want to check those things as well to make sure that you know where you stand, checking your credit report, locking it if you need to make sure that no one can use your credit information to open up debt in your name. So do that, checking that credit. And then I shared this last week about automating your finances. One of the things I told y'all I did was, I had money coming out of my paycheck going into credit union or different savings account, and make sure that employer automatically takes it off, and so and you live within the means of what your net pay is. So look into that aspect of making that money come out automatically. If you know that your finances are not there and you have exceeding debt, you may not want to automate some of your um, payments, put it on bill pay. But you can control that as well if you do it through the bank. And this way you can control what comes out, when it comes out, how it comes out, and instead of doing it with the creditor itself, automating these things through your bank as well to keep you on track, especially if you know you have a history of forgetting to pay your bills. Set them up on automatic payments, and then again, you're monitoring, watching your finances and making sure that things are not coming out and that you're not spending the swiping, and remembering, and I think I shared it was last week, that I had two separate accounts. I had one which is primarily, this is where my bills, all my stuff came out of, the things that are important. Those came out of that account. This is where the vast majority of my paycheck went into. Then I had a separate account where I had a percentage that went into that account, and that's where if I wanted to go to Starbucks or go out to eat or whatever, go shopping or get my nails done, get a haircut or whatever, that's where that money went to, and I didn't have to worry about my bills not being paid, because this is where the bulk of my paycheck went to, and set aside 10-15% to go to that account, and then make sure also in that budgeting that you're setting aside your tithes. make sure that you're giving. So generosity needs to be a portion of what you are setting aside, and then making sure that you are giving as well. So you wanted to make sure that that's a part of your giving strategy, as far as savings, that you're given to, the work of the Lord. That's important that we do that, that we give that amount, that we make sure that we're giving that. If you're getting a income tax refund, that is a great way. Instead of like, oh, I'm going to go shopping. No, how about, yes, you set aside, okay, you're like, okay, I'm taking $200 out of that, and this, I'm going to go crazy with $200. But you're like, okay, I'm getting back 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. You've got kids, you're getting $4, $5, $6, $7,000 back, depending on the number of children and the amount of money you have under 18, and you're getting that earned income child credit. Take the money and pay off the bills, and save some of it. I had that automatic, that when my um, income tax went into my checking account, I had an automated process that a percentage of that went into savings, and it automatically took it off. Took it, and it goes into savings, no matter what it is. It's a set percentage, whether it's 10, 15, 20% of that, or whatever it is, automatically every time it goes into savings. Anytime I have money go into my checking account, I have it set up that a percentage of that automatically goes to savings. And then I have an automated savings every 2 weeks, that a certain amount goes into my savings accounts every 2 weeks. And so again, this will kind of help you to build, when you have these automated processes, kind of helps you and then it together. Get on a budget. A budget is not bondage. It's a tool for your freedom. So make sure that you have that. You have a budget set up, because it tells you, again, where your money is going. You can control that money. You know what you have coming in. You know what needs to go out. And then you have a plan, and then celebrate. I love celebrating small wins, whatever it is. Start, like I said, start small. I started out doing $5 every 2 weeks, and then I increased it. Start there if that's what you can do. Do that. That $5 a month, and get it going into your account, so that you know that you have at least that small amount that's going. And then we talked about that money mindset, about how to reset your mindset and reset and rewrite your money story. How do you go about doing that? Again, speaking life over your finances. So about the dogs barking in the background, so maybe at the door. That is, that lack is not your portion. That you will come to that place where, you will get out of the bondage of debt, because debt is bondage. Debt will keep you stuck. But debt will keep you in a place where you are just tired. I talk about that, wanting to escape and setting up your life for the new you, and that reset life that you want. Proverbs 21:5 says, the plans of the diligent lead to profit. So planning, having a budget, getting that wisdom part in there, learning how to do it, and building up that financial blueprint for your future, to get yourself to the place where you need to be, so that you are walking in financial freedom and not walking in debt. So how do you get out of that? And so when we think about, our financial life and the legacy that we want to leave behind, how do we start? And, one of my favorite sayings is that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. So take that first step of doing it afraid, of walking into that thing. Like I said, start small, get with your payroll folks, and start with that first $5 every 2 weeks, if that's what you need to do. Again, setting up a budget, You don't have to go to necessarily to one of those places. Like I said, there's so many different places or apps available. I used to use Rocket Money is a good one that you can use through my bank account. They have budgeting tools, and probably a lot of banks may have those budgeting tools that they will help you, and they will tell you, you say how much you make, and they'll tell you, and they'll track in, well, you spend this much on. And I see those alerts coming, it was like, you spend more than 25% of your, and I'm like, okay, yes, I did. I did spend more. I know that I did. And so this again will kind of help you, that awareness, that getting that light moment in where you're seeing for yourself, where your money is going, what's happening with your money, and then you can make decisions based on that, because you need to be aware. And so once you're aware of what's going on, if you're good at Excel and you set up an Excel spreadsheet, put your money in, and then take your receipts. You get receipts for everything that you spend, and then put it in for each month, and then you're like, oh God, I spent this much money. And again, you need to know where your money is going, so that you can reroute and refocus yourself in making sure that you are doing what's best in securing the bag that you have. Again, securing the bag is not just about having money in the bank, but it's about being stable and getting your financial house in order. Is about being intentional. So it's going to take work. It's going to but do you want to have freedom? That's the question. Do you want to be financially free, to be able to do what you want to do, to be able to have the life that you want? So you can't build your future on a shaky foundation. So let's start today, again, making a small step to building the financial future that you want, so that you're not living in fear. But you're walking, and it's great. We're walking in by faith, but when we don't have when our foundation is shaky, all the faith in the world is not going to help you if you're not doing what you need to do in order to do what you need to do. And so when we can pray about it, we can talk about it, but it's going to take action. Faith without works is dead. So make sure that you're putting faith in action by taking these steps that we need to do. So remember that you were made for more. We're allowed to thrive in 25. So let's get together. So it's part of one of the goals that you're setting for yourself. This may be one of those things about getting your financial house in order, knowing where you are, knowing where you're going. And this will help you also plan for the future that you want. And, we want to leave a legacy for our children. We want to make sure that we're not, that even in our old age, that we are not living in fear, because we don't know what's going to happen with Social Security and all these different things. And so we can't fix our eyes and say, well, I want to have this. We don't know. So we're making sure that we are prepared for whatever. And if it's there, it's a bonus. And if it's not, you're prepared to live and to live well. So again, I want to thank you all for joining me for another episode of Empowered to Live. Again, join me next week when I have my first podcast guest. Yay! Ms. Rita Stewart of Legacy Financial will be joining me next week, sharing about, continue going beyond securing our bag. And so we'll be looking at topics. Let me grab this here about our topics for next week. She'll be talking about taking our savings seriously. So she's going to add another layer to that. How about automating our finances? Just another level, getting out of debt, improving our credit scores, and creating a financial blueprint. So those are some of the topics that we'll be talking about next week. So catch me then. I look forward to seeing you all again. And remember, God has given us everything that we need to live this life and to live it in abundance. Have a great night.